13 biggest Golden Age Hollywood plastic surgery disasters. Stop rolling. Dear God, what happened to her face? The horrified director's words echoed across the suddenly silent soundstage. The makeup artist frantically tried to conceal the botched surgery, but under the merciless studio lights, there was no hiding the truth. The actress, once celebrated as the most beautiful woman in the world, had become unrecognizable to her own crew. This wasn't just an isolated tragedy. This was Hollywood's darkest, most carefully guarded secret. The faces you thought you knew, those icons of Golden Age perfection whose beauty seemed eternal, were hiding devastating realities behind the glamour. What the camera never showed were the brutal surgeries, the experimental procedures, the desperate attempts to freeze time that ended in disfigurement and despair. While today's celebrities openly discuss their work, Golden Age stars suffered in silence, trapped in a system that demanded youth at any cost, then discarded them when surgical disasters made them unemployable. Today we reveal the shocking truth behind Hollywood's most tragic transformations. What you're about to see isn't just celebrity gossip. It's evidence of an industry that systematically destroyed the very beauty it claimed to worship. Some of these stories are so disturbing, they've been actively suppressed for decades. Others reveal brutal studio practices that would be criminal today. All of them will forever change how you see the golden era of Hollywood glamour. One Rita Hayworth brutalized by the studio system. Hold her down tighter. I can't work if she keeps flinching. The year was 1937. In a back room at Columbia Pictures, 18-year-old Margarita Carmen Canino sobbed as electricity surged through the metal needles inserted along her hairline. The studio-assigned electrologist continued her work despite the young actress's tears. After all, Harry Kahn, Columbia's notorious president, had ordered this transformation. And in Hollywood, what Harry Kahn wanted, Harry Kahn got. This wasn't a scene from a horror film. This was a systematic erasure of Rita Worth's ethnic identity, a brutal procedure repeated weekly for over a year. Born to a Spanish father and Irish-American mother, Worth possessed stunning natural beauty with distinctly Spanish features, including a lower hairline typical of her Mediterranean heritage. But studio executives had a chilling verdict, too ethnic for mainstream America. The solution? Painful electrolysis to raise her hairline by over an inch, permanently destroying hair follicles across her forehead and temples through electrical cauterization. The agony was excruciating. Her daughter later revealed that Rita would sob through entire sessions only to be told to return the following week for more, but the electrical torture was just the beginning of her transformation. Columbia Pictures systematically stripped away every trace of her Spanish heritage. Her naturally black hair was chemically processed to that famous auburn red. Her olive skin was lightened with harsh bleaching creams that caused permanent pigmentation damage. Even her name was whitewashed. Margarita Carmen Canino became Rita Hayworth, a stage name selected specifically for its wasp appeal. The result, the love goddess whose pinup adorned thousands of military barracks during World War II, the star whose sensual dance in Gilda became one of cinema's most iconic moments. But at what cost? Every time I look in the mirror, I see the scars. Rita confided to a makeup artist in the 1950s. The electrolysis left permanent damage, visible marking along her hairline that required constant coverage throughout her career. As she aged, these scars became increasingly difficult to hide. Cinematographer Rudolph Mate, who shot Gilda, later admitted, "We had to light Rita from specific angles to hide the scarring along her hairline. There were certain close-ups we simply couldn't do." The cruel irony. By the 1970s, when Rita developed early-onset Alzheimer's, she would obsessively touch her hairline, repeatedly tracing the scars from procedures she could no longer remember. Her daughter Yasmin reported that even in the fog of dementia, Rita would stare into mirrors trying to fix her hairline, murmuring, "Something's wrong. They did something to my face." Today, film historians recognize that Worth's makeover would qualify as studio abuse. The young actress had no choice. either submit to these painful transformations or lose her contract. Her ethnicity wasn't just modified. It was violently erased through physical pain and permanent disfigurement. Next time you see that famous Rita Hayworth image, the one that inspired countless pinups, look closely at her hairline. What appears to be Hollywood glamour is actually the visible scar of studio, sanctioned torture inflicted on a teenage girl deemed too ethnic for American audiences. I think too much too soon. No, I don't think it was that. I think I had a weakness, and it was too Jan Tierney, the perfect face that drove her mad. Life magazine 1940, possibly the most beautiful woman in movie history. This wasn't typical Hollywood hyperbole. Jean Tierney possessed what cinematographers, directors, and audiences universally acknowledge as facial perfection. Her bone structure was so flawless that makeup artists reportedly wept with joy when working with her. Her performance in Laura created such a powerful impact that men across America became obsessed with her ethereal beauty. But perfect wasn't perfect enough for 20th Century Fox. In a recently unearthed memo from studio, head Darryl F. Zanuck, dated 1941, he wrote, Tierney's jawline could use subtle refinement. Her nose, while beautiful, has a slight width that the camera sometimes exaggerates. Consult with doctor name redacted about. Minimal adjustments that won't affect her unique appeal. What followed was a devastating cascade of minimal adjustments that would ultimately contribute to one of Hollywood's most tragic mental breakdowns. I remember the day she came back after that first surgery, recalled makeup artist Helen Hunt. She stood in front of the mirror, touching her jaw over and over, saying, "It's different. It's not me anymore." Something broke in her that day. Unlike the obvious disasters that befell other actresses, Tierney's surgical alterations were indeed subtle, barely noticeable to the casual observer. But to Jean herself, they were catastrophic. According to her sister, Jean became obsessed with the tiny changes, staring at mirrors for hours, convinced her perfect face had been destroyed. This fixation coincided with the beginning of her psychiatric troubles. By 1943, she was experiencing bouts of depression, triggered, her psychiatrist noted, by profound body dysmorphia following facial alterations. In simpler terms, Jean could no longer recognize herself, and it was driving her mad. The psychological damage was compounded when directors began lighting her differently to accommodate the subtle changes to her bone structure. Otto Premiere, who had directed her in Laura before the procedures, was reportedly furious upon seeing her in 1945, shouting at producers, "What have you done to her face? The angles are all wrong now." As her mental health deteriorated throughout the 1950s, Jean underwent controversial electroshock therapy. Over 25 brutal treatments that caused further physical damage. The combination of earlier surgical alterations, poor healing due to her psychological state, and the physical ravages of electroshock therapy created what her physician described in private notes as facial collapse, a progressive deterioration of the once perfect features. In a heart-wrenching 1954 interview, Tierney's last before being institutionalized, she unwittingly predicted her own fate. "They say the camera never lies, but sometimes I look at my face on screen now and don't recognize the person staring back. Hollywood promised me immortality, but gave me a stranger's reflection instead." By the time she attempted a comeback in the early 1960s, the damage was unmistakable. Howard Hughes, once so obsessed with her beauty that he proposed marriage multiple times, passed her at a Hollywood function without recognition. When told it was Jean Tierney, he reportedly whispered, "My God, what happened to her face?" Film historian David Thompson perhaps summarized it best. Jean Tierney wasn't just Hollywood's most perfect face. She was also its most perfect victim. They convinced a flawless woman she was flawed, altered her, then abandoned her. When the alterations destroyed both her appearance and her sanity. Today, plastic surgeons use Tierney's case as a cautionary tale about body dysmorphic disorder. showing how even minimal surgical changes can trigger catastrophic psychological consequences in vulnerable patients. The face that was perfect became the mind that was tortured. All because Hollywood convinced her that perfection itself needed improvement. Well, Brother Willie wouldn't do that. Thought it out pretty, didn't he? Marshall will bust. 3. Barbara Payton. From starlet to cautionary tale. Barbara Payton's story isn't just about plastic surgery gone wrong. It's about how quickly the dream factory can become a nightmare. In the late 1940s, Barbara was Hollywood's next big thing. A blonde bombshell with talent to match her stunning looks. Warner Brothers signed her to a lucrative contract, and she starred opposite James Cagney in Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye. Her future seemed limitless until scandal derailed everything. A very public love triangle with actors Franchot Tone and Tom Neal, which ended with Tone being severely beaten by Neal, made Barbara box office poison almost overnight. Studios dropped her and roles dried up. Desperate to regain her fading beauty and restart her career, Barbara turned to what industry insiders call bargain basement surgeries, procedures performed by coup,